cool that Sony has made it easier than ever to use the a6700 as a webcam. No software, no extra hardware, just a USB-C cable, and they've even upped the ante, allowing the a6700 to stream at 4K 30 over USB. But we all know that the a6700 has an issue, and that issue is heat. So did Sony waste this feature on a camera that can't even stay on long enough for you to complete a reasonable live stream, video podcast, or conference call? Kind of. Setting it up is extremely simple. It's essentially 3 steps in the manual, and those 3 steps are plug in USB-C to camera, plug in other end to computer, turn on camera, and select USB live stream from the menu that pops up. That's it. The biggest issue for me was finding a USB-C cable that was compatible. For some reason, the a6700 is very persnickety in its USB-C cable preferences. I was able to find a cable that worked with my FX30 much easier than I was with my a6700. If you don't know what kind of cable you have, just go out and buy a specific cable to work with this camera as a webcam. In particular, you want to look for a USB-C cable that is Gen 3.2 that can transfer data of at least 5 gigabits per second. If you just search for that, go to Amazon, go to your web browser, search for USB 3 Gen 3.2 data transfer of at least 5 gigabits per second. You'll probably find cables nowadays that are faster than that. I got one at Best Buy that's 10 gigabits per second, and it worked fine with this camera. That's the setup. How does it work? Can you actually use the a6700 for live streaming, podcasting, and conference calls? I tested 4K 30 over USB, 4K 30 over HDMI, 1080p 60 over USB, and 1080p 60 over HDMI. And here's what I found. In 4K 30 over USB, my stream lasted for 47 minutes and 11 seconds before the camera overheated and shut off. I got a high temperature warning about 4 minutes before the camera overheated and shut off. In 4K 30 over HDMI, it was a similar story. The stream lasted for 41 minutes and 50 seconds before the camera overheated and shut off. And I got a high temp warning on the camera just about at 4 minutes before the camera shut off. In 1080p 60 via USB and via HDMI, I was able to stream for a solid 2 hours with no high temperature warnings and no issues from the camera. I just shut off the stream once I reached the 2-hour mark. I think you'll be good streaming with the a6700 at 1080p with no issues. Maybe if you're in a really, really hot, humid climate. Since I didn't even get a high temp warning, the camera was warm to the touch, but it wasn't hot like it gets when you are streaming or recording in 4K. I enabled the option for the camera to receive power over USB in all of these tests because I think that's a reasonable thing to do when you're going to be streaming for a long time. You want to make sure that the battery won't die on you. In 1080p 60 via USB, the battery drained from 100% down to 78% during that 2-hour long stream. And then in 1080p 60 via HDMI, the battery only drained down to 94% in that 2-hour stream. In all these tests, I had the camera on a tripod. The LCD screen was flipped out. I obviously had the temperature threshold set to high, continuous autofocus. I also allowed the USB cable to help power the camera. What happens if you record internally while streaming at 4K 30? Leave your guesses in the comments below. I'll give you a second. It overheats faster. Did you guess correctly? I did a stream at 4K 30 over HDMI using internal recording, 4K 30 XAVC-S, 422 10-bit, and that stream only lasted for 29 minutes and 52 seconds. I didn't test internal recording at HD or full HD resolution because I don't like the internal recording at HD in these cameras. The quality isn't great. And it's not necessarily because you're going from 4K to 1080p. It's more so to do with the way the camera is downsampling from 6K's resolution down to 2K for 1080p. If I wanted to record the stream or the podcast, I would probably just use the streaming software to do the recording at 1080p because the quality, in my opinion, on the 1080p internal recording isn't that great, so might as well just use the computer to do the recording anyway. Unsurprisingly, the a6700 does overheat streaming at 4K 30. I was able to go around 45 minutes over USB and HDMI. So it's doable if you know you're going to be only streaming for around 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, then you're good to go. In October of 2023, I don't think a lot of people are actually streaming in 4K yet. So a lot of people don't even have the upload speeds to reliably stream in 4K. So I think at 1080p 60 and especially 1080p 30, you're going to be pretty good to go with the a6700. Obviously, it's all going to depend on your ambient environment. How cool is it? How hot is it? Your mileage may vary, but I thought this was a pretty reasonable test of the capabilities of this camera, streaming at 4K 30 over USB and HDMI, and the results you might expect. A couple of things to know about using this as a webcam over USB. At 4K UHD, the available frame rates are 30, 25, 15, and 12.5. There's no 24. At full HD or 1080p, you've got 60, 50, 30, and 25. And then at 720p, you've got 30 and 25. So interestingly, over USB, you've got no 23.976 or no 24 frames per second options. It also locks you out of any of the picture profiles, so you have to use the PP off setting when you're streaming via USB. Let me wrap it up by talking about pros and cons of using this over USB versus HDMI. So USB, pros are simplicity. Essentially, all you need is a USB-C cable to stream. No extra software, no extra hardware. At 4K 30, it did last 6 minutes longer over USB than it did over HDMI. Cons over USB, finicky cable selection, no picture profiles, and no 24 frames per second. Pros and cons of using HDMI. Pros are you still have access to all the picture profiles. And if, like me, you like to use S-Log3, because this will also transfer the LUT over HDMI, you can essentially use the S709 LUT and that will be transferred over to your stream as well. Or if you like to input your own LUTs, then you can also use those to transfer over the stream. Depending on your capture hardware, you can potentially stream at 24 frames per second. Another benefit over HDMI I forgot to mention is that you can record the info display, meaning that you can actually record what is on the LCD of the camera if you need to do that for some reason. The cons of HDMI are that you do need capture hardware. So you do need a capture card, you need a live switcher, some kind of video recorder, something to take that HDMI feed from the camera and transfer it into your computer. You can't just plug it right into your computer. Nothing is going to happen. The HDMI did overheat 6 minutes faster at 4K 30. I don't have a comprehensive list of Sony cameras that are plug and play over USB like the a6700. You'll have to check your camera's manual to figure out if you need the Imaging Edge app or if you don't. If you do, it'll say download this app. If you don't, it won't mention the app at all. It'll just say plug it in over USB-C. I hope that helps. Let me know. See you later.